Today is the word from the first half of Psalm 31. Today's text is speaking about the prayer of that future Messiah Jesus on the cross, and once again speaking about the prayer of that future Messiah Jesus on the cross, and also speaking about the suffering of the cross and the death of that Messiah Jesus. Then, how is it speaking? Today, we want to learn about this and share the grace. First, today's text speaks about the prayer of that future Messiah Jesus on the cross. In today's text, Psalm 31 verses 1 to 4, it says, "In you, Lord, I have taken refuge, let me never be put to shame, deliver me in your righteousness. Turn your ear to me, come quickly to my rescue, be my rock of refuge, a strong fortress to save me. Since you are my rock and my fortress, for the sake of your name lead and guide me. Keep me free from the trap that is set secretly for me, for you are my refuge. In you, Lord, I have taken refuge, let me never be put to shame, deliver me in your righteousness." Here, the first person refers to the Messiah Jesus who is coming to this earth in the future. In other words, it is expressed as if the Messiah Jesus has already come to this earth in a physical body and is hanging on the cross, making a plea. No, David is declaring the passion of the Messiah Jesus in the form of a prayer, as if he himself were that Messiah Jesus. In short, when the Messiah Jesus comes to this earth, he will die by shedding his blood on the cross. Then, the Messiah Jesus will plead on that cross as follows. Here, taking refuge in you implies the situation of the Messiah Jesus suffering on the cross. Then, at that time, the Messiah Jesus will take refuge in God. This implies that the Messiah Jesus did not hang on the cross because he had some sin, but because there was some intent, purpose, or plan. Also, this does not mean that there is any break in the relationship or a gap between the Messiah Jesus and God, rather, it adds intimacy and trust. Also, being put to shame here refers to God ignoring the Messiah Jesus, turning away from him, and not responding to his plea. Of course, the appearance at that time will seem as if God is ignoring the Messiah Jesus hanging on the cross, turning away from him, and not responding to his plea. However, God will not put the Messiah Jesus to shame forever. Also, your righteousness here may refer to the attributes of God overflowing with mercy, compassion, and love. However, this is God's righteousness, implying the intent and purpose of God sending the Messiah Jesus to this earth and letting him die by shedding his blood on the cross. In short, God's intent and purpose in letting the Messiah Jesus die by shedding his blood on the cross is to remove all sins of everyone who believes in this and to call them righteous freely. Therefore, even for this sake, he is asking God to save the Messiah Jesus himself from that death on the cross. How about it? However, in the sense that the prayer of the Messiah Jesus is surely fulfilled and accomplished, it can also be called a prophetic declaration. In short, in the future, the Messiah Jesus himself will die by shedding his blood on that cross. However, God will not put the Messiah Jesus himself to shame forever, and even for the sake of God's righteousness, he will surely save him. Isn't it so? If God were not to make the Messiah Jesus himself come back to life from that death on the cross, the work of the Messiah Jesus for that righteousness of God would end in failure. Therefore, God will surely make the Messiah Jesus himself come back to life from death on the cross. Turn your ear to me, come quickly to my rescue, be my rock of refuge, a strong fortress to save me. Since you are my rock and my fortress, for the sake of your name lead and guide me. Now, the verbs in this sentence are all used in the imperative form, emphasizing the earnest plea of the Messiah Jesus. However, in the sense that the plea of the Messiah Jesus is surely fulfilled and accomplished, rather, this emphasizes that it will surely be so in the future. In short, God will turn his ear to listen to the Messiah Jesus' plea and rescue him quickly. No, God should be the rock of refuge and the fortress that saves. Here, rock of refuge symbolizes God's eternity, immutability, and faithfulness. In short, it can be seen that God the Father made a covenant of redemption with the Messiah Jesus before eternity, which was that if the Messiah Jesus came to this earth in a physical body and died by shedding his blood on the cross, God the Father would make the Messiah Jesus come back to life from that death on the cross. In other words, this covenant of redemption of God never changes, just like a solid rock, and God will surely keep that promise, making the Messiah Jesus himself come back to life from that death on the cross. No, God will protect and guard the Messiah Jesus himself from all attacks of the forces of Satan, just like a sturdy fortress. Since you are my rock and my fortress, for the sake of your name lead and guide me. Now, at the very beginning of this sentence, the Hebrew conjunction key is used to speak about the reason for the strong faith and conviction that God will make the Messiah Jesus himself come back to life from that death on the cross. In short, the reason is that God is the rock and the fortress of the Messiah Jesus himself. How about it? The Messiah Jesus emphasizes once again that God the Father is his own rock and fortress. In other words, as mentioned earlier, that covenant of redemption that the Messiah Jesus himself made with God the Father before eternity never changes, just like a rock, and will surely be fulfilled and accomplished. No, God will surely protect and guard the Messiah Jesus himself, just like a fortress. Here, your name refers to the eternity, immutability, and faithfulness of God who made the covenant of redemption before eternity and is fulfilling that covenant. Also, guide me here has the meaning of to lead to a place with water to rest, and to restore vitality, and it is in the imperfect form. In short, although it is translated as a plea guide me here now, actually, it is better to translate it as you will lead me to a place with water to rest or you will restore my vitality. This depicts the image of a shepherd not only protecting and guarding the flock from lions or hyenas on that meadow, but also leading them to quiet waters to boost the vitality of the exhausted flock. In short, even for the sake of God's eternity, immutability, and faithfulness, he will surely lead the Messiah Jesus himself and restore his vitality. In other words, God will surely make the Messiah Jesus himself come back to life from that death on the cross. Keep me free from the trap that is set secretly for me, for you are my refuge. Here, the trap that is set secretly symbolizes all the schemes, deceptions, and evil acts that the enemies of the Messiah Jesus perform to catch and kill the Messiah Jesus, just like hunters. Of course, here it refers to the enemies catching the Messiah Jesus and crucifying him to death. It is expressed as if a hunter dug a pit to catch an animal and set a net there, and the Messiah Jesus got caught in it. Also, keep me free, take out, here actually means to pull out, and it is used in the imperfect form, meaning you will pull out. Therefore, here too, rather than translating it as keep me free, it is much more contextually appropriate to say you will pull me out. In short, God will pull the Messiah Jesus himself out from the trap that the enemy set secretly to catch and kill him. In other words, God will surely make the Messiah Jesus himself come back to life from that death on the cross. While doing so, he speaks about the reason as follows. For you are my refuge. Now, at the very beginning of this sentence, the Hebrew conjunction key is used to speak about the reason why the Messiah Jesus is so convinced and confident. It is because God is my fortress. In other words, God will surely remember the covenant of redemption that he made before eternity, surely fulfill it, and surely accomplish it. No, by remembering that covenant, God will surely make the Messiah Jesus himself come back to life from that death on the cross. Second, today's text once again speaks about the prayer of that future Messiah Jesus on the cross. In today's text, Psalm 31 verses 5-8, it says, Into your hands I commit my spirit, deliver me, Lord, my faithful God. I hate those who cling to worthless idols, as for me, I trust in the Lord. I will be glad and rejoice in your love, for you saw my affliction and knew the anguish of my soul. You have not given me over to the hands of the enemy but have set my feet in a spacious place. Into your hands I commit my spirit, deliver me, Lord, my faithful God. Here, my spirit refers to the Messiah Jesus himself hanging on the cross, namely, the whole existence of Jesus. Also, your hands here symbolize God's power and greatness. In short, in the future, when the Messiah Jesus comes to this earth in a physical body, he will entrust his soul to God's hand while hanging on that cross. Then, what happened to this word? This word is the one that Jesus quoted and declared just before dying by shedding his blood on the cross. In Luke 23 verse 46, it says, Jesus called out with a loud voice, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. When he had said this, he breathed his last. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. How about it? We can confirm that the word of today's text is being fulfilled exactly through Jesus. In short, Jesus himself is the Messiah and the Christ who came to this earth following the word prophesied in the Old Testament, namely, the word prophesied in this psalm. Also, this declaration means that Jesus' own death on the cross was not something he suffered inevitably by the Roman soldiers because he had no power, but a voluntary sacrifice in which Jesus himself gave up his life. In short, the expression entrusting my soul here indicates that the sovereignty of life does not lie with the Roman soldiers, but with God in himself. In other words, Jesus' own death on the cross is an event prophesied in the Bible, God's plan, and God's doing. Also, at the same time, just as he declared it is finished just before declaring this word, it indicates that now Jesus himself has completed his physical ministry for saving humans and is returning to God. Anyway, in the future, when the Messiah Jesus is crucified on that cross, he will entrust his soul to God's hand. Then, what will God do? Deliver me, Lord, my faithful God. Here, truth, faithful, indicates God's faithfulness. In short, God is the faithful one who made a covenant of redemption with the Messiah Jesus himself before eternity and has been working hard to fulfill it. Also, deliver here means to rescue or to save, and it is used in the prophetic perfect form. In short, since God is faithful, he will surely save the Messiah Jesus himself from that death on the cross. No, according to the covenant of redemption made before eternity, God will surely make the Messiah Jesus himself come back to life from that death. I hate those who cling to worthless idols, as for me, I trust in the Lord. Here, cling to, worship, means to pay attention to or to act by paying attention. In short, those who cling to worthless idols refers to those who, instead of paying attention to and focusing on God, pay more attention to and focus on vain idols or worldly power. But here, a definite article is attached in front of the participle form, referring to those enemies who plot to catch and kill the Messiah Jesus and rely more on worldly power. In short, these are, inherently, those who do not know God and cannot recognize the Messiah Jesus. No, they are truly cursed ones who are contrasted with our people of God. Then, who are they? They are the religious leaders of Jerusalem and their group who, 2,000 years later, allied with the Roman governor Pilate and crucified the Messiah Jesus. Also in John 11 verses 47 to 48, it says, "Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. 'What are we accomplishing?' they asked. 'If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation.' The Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation." In short, it can be seen that they are not paying attention to and focusing on the will of God, who performs all kinds of miracles through Jesus, but are only focusing on and relying more on Roman power to protect their own popularity and vested interests. Also in John 19 verse 15, it says, "But they shouted, 'Take him away! Take him away! Crucify him! Shall I crucify your king?' Pilate asked. 'We have no king but Caesar,' the chief priests answered. 'We have no king but Caesar.' It can be seen that the chief priests, who should serve and have only God as their king, are declaring the Roman emperor as their only king. No, it can be seen that they are relying more on worldly power to protect their glory and vested interests. This is exactly the image of those who cling to worthless idols spoken of in today's text. No, the Messiah Jesus will hate such people, and he himself will believe in and trust only in God. But here, all verbs are used in the perfect form, representing a future resolution. In short, the Messiah Jesus will surely judge and curse those who cling to worthless idols. Then, why is the Messiah Jesus declaring, "I will trust in the Lord" newly on the cross? 2,000 years ago, the main charge for which Jesus was executed on the cross was the crime of blasphemy for insulting God. Also in John 5 verse 18, it says, "For this reason they tried all the more to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God." To the Jews at that time, God was a holy existence whose name they hardly dared to call. But when Jesus appeared, called such God his own Father, and claimed to be equal with God, they probably felt an unbearable sense of insult. Then they accused Jesus of being possessed by a demon. In short, they claimed that Jesus' casting out of demons was nothing more than a show using the power of Beelzebul, the prince of demons, to command subordinate demons. No, they claimed that Jesus is one who serves Beelzebul. In short, the Messiah Jesus word in today's text can be said to be the answer to this. The Messiah Jesus answer is, "It is not so. It is not so," and Jesus himself is one who believes in and trusts in Jehovah God. "I will be glad and rejoice in your love, for you saw my affliction and knew the anguish of my soul." Here, your love, kindness, refers to the death of the Messiah Jesus on the cross. Usually, in these psalms, your love refers to the amazing love of God who gave up even his only begotten Son to save his own people chosen before eternity. This is the same here. The second half following here also supports this. In other words, "For you saw my affliction and knew the anguish of my soul" is a relative clause modifying the love appearing before. In other words, this explains what the love appearing before is. Here, affliction means pain, and saw, looked upon, means to see or to look at. Also, anguish, tribulation, here refers to that passion of the cross, the Messiah Jesus suffering on the cross. In short, your love here refers to the love of God who, despite knowing well that in the future God will look at the Messiah Jesus' pain, that suffering, and pain of the cross, and despite knowing well how atrocious and terrible that pain of the cross is, gave up even his only begotten Son. In other words, the Messiah Jesus hanging on the cross and dying by shedding his blood is because of this covenantal love of God. No, the Messiah Jesus himself hanging on the cross and dying by shedding his blood is for saving God's people whom God chose before eternity. In short, the Messiah Jesus will be glad and rejoice in this covenantal love of God. To say it again, the Messiah Jesus will handle his own death on the cross by being glad and rejoicing. Then, why is the Messiah Jesus speaking like this? In Matthew 27 verses 39 to 44, it says, "Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads. In the same way the chief priests, the teachers of the law and the elders mocked him. In the same way the rebels who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him." Here, shaking their heads indicated extreme contempt and mockery in the Jewish society at that time. No, at that time, this crucifixion not only gave the prisoner immense pain, but also gave shame and social annihilation. In short, this crucifixion was conducted in a state of total nudity, without even a single thread on the prisoner's body. Although we see Jesus' appearance through sacred paintings as having that part covered with a cloth while being crucified, in reality, he probably suffered it in total nudity. Therefore, Jesus, who had to suffer all kinds of accusations, mockery, and laughter in a naked state before many people, must have felt great shame and humiliation. However, seeing today's text, the Messiah Jesus says that he will handle that crucifixion by being glad and rejoicing. Also in Hebrews 12 verse 2, it says, "Fixing our eyes on Jesus. For the joy set before him he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." Here, scorning its shame, not caring, does not mean that Jesus did not feel shame at all, but that he willingly endured it for a greater purpose that overwhelmed that shame, namely, the joy of human salvation. In short, Jesus, paradoxically, endured the shame of that crucifixion to save those who accused, mocked, and despised him, and rather handled that crucifixion by being glad and rejoicing. Also, what is the reason the Messiah Jesus handles that crucifixion by being glad and rejoicing? "You have not given me over to the hands of the enemy but have set my feet in a spacious place." All verbs appearing in this sentence are all used in the prophetic perfect form, representing future conviction. In short, here, "you have not given me over to the hands of the enemy" indicates that in the future, God will not let the Messiah Jesus be left alone according to the will of those enemies. In other words, the forces of Satan will run wild to ruin and hinder the Messiah Jesus' work of salvation, but God will protect and guard the Messiah Jesus so that it does not become so. Then, what does "set my feet in a spacious place" mean here? Usually in the Bible, a narrow place represents suffering or disaster. Here, it refers to the situation where the enemies have nailed the Messiah Jesus to the cross and are hanging him, and are accusing and mocking him. In contrast, a spacious place means a vast land open on all sides, representing a situation where the Messiah Jesus has escaped from the enemies and gained complete freedom to move as he pleases. In short, if the cross symbolizes that narrow place where the feet are nailed and cannot move, resurrection can be said to be the event of setting those feet in a spacious place. In other words, in the future, God will save the Messiah Jesus from death on the cross and make him come back to life. No, by making him come back to life from that death, he will make the Messiah Jesus able to continue that work of salvation freely as he pleases. This is exactly the reason why the Messiah Jesus handles that crucifixion by being glad and rejoicing. Finally, today's text speaks about the Messiah Jesus suffering on the cross and death. In today's text, Psalm 31 verses 9 to 10, it says, "Be merciful to me, Lord, for I am in distress, my eyes grow weak with sorrow, my soul and body with grief. My life is consumed by anguish and my years by groaning, my strength fails because of my affliction, and my bones grow weak. Be merciful to me, Lord, for I am in distress, my eyes grow weak with sorrow, my soul and body with grief. My life is consumed by anguish and my years by groaning, my strength fails because of my affliction, and my bones grow weak." Now, this word speaks about the Messiah Jesus suffering on the cross. Do you know well about this suffering of the cross? In short, it is said that if some criminal is nailed with nails in the palms and his body is hung on the cross, those palms will be torn due to the weight of his body, and then he will feel immense pain. Also, it is said that all nerves of the body are destroyed, all muscles of the body are twisted, and extreme convulsions occur in all parts of the body. However, it is said that the most painful thing in crucifixion is breathing. In short, it is said that the person hung on the cross has the diaphragm risen, so it is easy to inhale breath, but it is extremely difficult to exhale breath. For this reason, to exhale breath, that criminal must use his nailed feet as a support to push his own body upward. Then, at that moment, that criminal's feet feel extreme pain again due to the stimulation of the nerves, but nevertheless, since that criminal must exhale breath again, he must use the nailed feet as a support again to push his body upward. This hellish pain is infinitely repeated until the moment of death. Here, "my eyes grow weak with sorrow, my soul and body with grief" refers exactly to this situation. Here, sorrow, anguish, refers to the pain coming from the stimulation by the nails. In short, eyes represents the state where vision is blurred and vitality is lost due to that pain, soul represents extreme pain as if burning from the inside, and body represents physical pain as if the internal organs are twisted and vitality is completely gone. "My life is consumed by anguish and my years by groaning, my strength fails because of my affliction, and my bones grow weak." Now, this word speaks about the Messiah Jesus' death on the cross. All verbs used in this sentence are used in the prophetic perfect form, representing future conviction. Here, consumed, sending away, means to end or to finish. In short, the life of the Messiah Jesus himself will end in the midst of pain and suffering, and his life on this earth will end in resentment and groaning. Then, what kind of resentment and groaning is it? Jesus coming to this earth in a physical body was to save lives that had no choice but to die eternally due to sin. But the world did not know this, and rather opposed and despised the Messiah Jesus, and finally ended up killing him by nailing him to the cross. It is the resentment and groaning about this. Also, my affliction, my iniquity, here refers to the sins of the world that the Messiah Jesus bore on the cross. In short, it can be said that the Messiah Jesus bore in their place the sins of us God's people whom God chose before eternity, and died by shedding his blood on that cross. In short, fails, weakening. Here means to stagger or to fall, expressing the appearance of the Messiah Jesus staggering and falling due to the weight while bearing the sins of us God's people on his shoulders. Also, my bones here is used as a plural of majesty, with the meaning of the bones of glory of the Messiah Jesus, which symbolizes the whole existence of the Messiah Jesus who came to this earth in a physical body. In exactly this way, all of the Messiah Jesus' physical ministry on this earth will be finished. Into your hands I commit my spirit. God. Thank you. I am grateful. I love you. We thank you for the grace of the Lord who died by shedding his blood on the cross to save us. Please bless us so that we can enter that heaven by believing in the merit of the blood of Jesus Christ. I bless and pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.